Hello and welcome to our Vector Forum 2024. It's number 3, and we have today with Aleg Vilinski a speaker which brings a lot of experiences from industrial automation background. Welcome to this Vector Forum. For those of you who are joining live, we will have an interactive session as before. For those who listen to the recorded version, we will also have possibilities that you contact us. My name is Christoph Ebert. As said, I'm responsible in Vector for the consulting activities, and I'm very glad to moderate this Vector Forum for you. And Aleg, why don't you also briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, thanks. Yeah, my name is Aleg Vilinski. I'm the technical lead at Festo. And yeah, today I will show you the topic SBOM.
Okay, thanks a lot. And that already indicates what is the topic which we are after for today. It's about SBOM. That sounds, let's say, not so familiar than many other topics like cybersecurity or safety or automation, but it's a key ingredient for all of those. But before we dive into the software bill of materials or SBOM, let me just briefly get into the topic.
Christoph, wir können dich gerade nicht hören. Du bist einmal stumm.
Then
Perfekt.
Would like to emphasize that our Vector Forum 24 is on deploying emergent technologies, and I will briefly introduce to the topic and also to ourselves. Vector, 4,000 people worldwide, different activities in automotive and in critical industries like medical, and my responsibility, as said, is for consulting. Now, the Vector Forum has been established when we started with Vector Consulting in order to build bridge from what are our projects towards what are your needs. And if you look to this picture, you see our 4 main topic: trust, that is safety, security, technology, transformation, and training. And we try to balance these topics over the years. And with this year topic, deploying emerging technology, it certainly centers around the middle with technology and transformation, but includes also trust, like what we will also hear today, and training, because all of that is also related towards how do we grow, how do we evolve. Few things about how we handle this training and this webinar. Now, the layout would be that we have about 10-minute intro. This is what is going on currently. Then Aleg will give an overview on this key topic of the demystifying SBOM and his experiences at Festo. Then we will have time for Q&A, and we will finally close everything within the 1 hour. For your practical guidance, use the MS Teams app. Browser might be not so performant, and therefore better to use the app. In case of problems, we will switch to a second channel with WebEx. In that case, all of you who registered will receive a mail, and in the mail there will be the link, and with that link we can hopefully seamlessly connect into this backup channel. Interaction, that's very important now for this Vector Forum, is by using the chat box. In the chat box, you simply can type, as usual, some questions, and we will also use this for a kind of a user survey, which we do in the beginning to just also activate all of you, at least those who listen live to this presentation. And what you can also do is in the question chat, you can just put your likes to the question which you think have most value. We also have in parallel a quiz ongoing, which you find the link below, and that runs in each of these sessions. It's the same quiz. You can participate, you can win something like a training, like books, etc. And we will then communicate to all of you who are winners. The normal setup for any sort of online presentation should not forget about risk mitigation. At least in our business, that's good and important topic. So make sure you know where to go in case of your own emergency situations. We'll keep it to 1 hour. You will receive the materials afterwards. That is typically a PDF and also later on an access to the MP4 recording. And we will certainly recommend that you have a reliable Wi-Fi connection. Use the chat for your questions and help yourself with a good and strong coffee. Of course, I'm aware, while the advantage with this Vector Forum is that we have really all time zones in theory feasible to join with 1 o'clock here in Europe. For US, it's very early. For Asia, it can be late. And that means in both cases, and also for us here after lunch, could be good to have a good coffee. Now, getting more into the topic, we do on an annual basis a survey with our clients. And one thing which we ask continuously is, what are your short-term, what are your mid-term challenges? And the one thing which strikes most is this topic to the far right, competence. It was already visible in the past year, but moved even further to the right, which means that most of us really suffer from insufficient competence, both quantitative and qualitative. And insufficient competence also means that we lack speed on innovation, that we might have unnecessary rework because we cannot deliver things with the quality level which we desire. And that can yield then also a vicious circle, because if we consume more of these scarce resources in rework, we have even less time to innovate. And that is exactly the reason why we decided to have this Vector Forum 24 on deploying emergent technologies, which is not a showcase on what are the technologies that are available, because that you certainly know yourself in your own business. We want to show how you deploy and how you really make a benefit out of it. And that is also the setup for this Vector Forum, where we have today Aleg Vilinski of Festo. We had already presentations from Marelli from Bosch, and we will proceed next week about Tongji University in China. And we further go with Healthineers and also have an internal presentation of Vector and finalize with Volkswagen. So it's a rich mix of different industries, leaders, that's for sure. And some are hidden champions like Vector. Some are more, let's say, known like, let's say, Siemens or Bosch or Volkswagen. But in all of these cases, you will learn how to deploy emergent technologies. And that brings us now to the topic of the software bill of material, and immediately then also to Aleg's presentation. The reasoning for the topic is that we have an increasing demand on software consistency and to mitigate legal exposure. And therefore, we also have in our survey, a quick survey, which is just a binary question. We consistently control software assets along the product lifecycle. Yes or no? And if you go to the chat window, you should see this survey. And you can just reply to it. And on that basis, let me just briefly entertain you with the relevance of the topic while you think about, do you have the control, or is there still room for improvement? Think about variance. Think about the growing legal exposure, which is not just a single standard, it's a wealth of standards. For instance, here in Europe, we have this growing cybersecurity demands, NIS2. Yesterday, European Union just released the Cybersecurity Act, Cyber Resilience Act, and we have a demand on liability and also consistency management, not just for the updates, but also that whatever we have to update is consistently done along the whole chain from the requirement to the regression test. On the other side, many companies really drown with inefficient software handling, and this is where a bill of material comes into the picture. Not just because of licenses, that was the initial use case, because license management is always important, but increasingly really to see how to map vulnerabilities on the changing software stack. And with that, I think it's the time now to hand over to Aleg. And I'm very interested to learn about how to introduce the software bill of material, what it means, and how to do that efficiently while mitigating the just mentioned challenges. Aleg, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll just start with the share. Hope everybody can see the presentation.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So starting with the topic again today, is topic around demystifying SBOM. So just everything regarding them and also showing some real-world applications. How are we working currently with SBOMs? Just a short introduction about myself. As already mentioned, I'm the technical lead of the Festo PSIRT, the product security and response team, meaning the topics mainly driving are vulnerability management. So everything related to it, being it as a software bill of materials, SBOM, but also VEX and CSOF formats that I will also include later on for documenting the status for vulnerabilities, and then also the SDLC, the secure development lifecycle. And I also linked GitHub, my GitHub profile, because there you will also see some topics I'm working on, also our tool, which is open source, which I will show later on. So what can you expect from the presentation today? First of all, I want to start, why do we require SBOM, which were already introduced by Mr. Ebert, but also what is an SBOM, and then also just some discussions we had at Festo, and also current standards and limitation, and finally the real-world workflow that we currently have at Festo. So to start with the topic SBOMs, why do we need software bill of materials? So yeah, the first topic that also I mentioned is we have already regulations in place. For example, the executive order for the 028 in the United States, which is already 3 years ago. And there is also minimum elements required, so with the minimum content of software bill of materials. And then we have also upcoming regulations for Cyber Resilience Act, for example, which is expected to take effect beginning in 3 years. And there's also you are required to have a software bill of material. However, the content of the software bill of material is still to be defined. And what we already see is that more and more customers are asking for the software bill of materials, primarily also for the use cases mentioned before, license management, but also more and more for the vulnerability, having some assets to identify vulnerabilities in the products. And these are also the internal use cases we already have in our company. So the license compliance, but also, I mean, if you already have your list of assets, then you can also use it to scan for vulnerabilities. And at the end, also to track if there are new vulnerabilities. Do I have these products in use that are affected? And then link them to this common security advisory framework, this CSOF advisories, just machine readable format, where you can map to your products. So what is an SBOM? As already mentioned, an SBOM is just a list of used product software components within your product. And on the high level, you have your meta information. So for example, who was the creator of the SBOM? When was the SBOM created? And then you have your main component, which have all the information that is also including the baselines of the component information, but it's the product which you are describing. And then you have a list of components. And within this components information, you are supplying information like supplier name, so who was the creator of the component, the name of the component, the version, so you can better also track your vulnerabilities, and then also your dependencies, so which how the component depending on each other, and then also the license information. And these are all informations that are required to fulfill the use cases I will just show later on. But what's also important is, which is also documented within the documents provided by the NTIA, is that you not only have your SBOM in place, but you also need practices and processes in place, meaning also just topics to discuss, like when do you update your software bill of material, or how do you deliver on software bill of material? Because even if your customers are asking for it, I don't think you want to send out every time an email. So there must be processes in place to automate this. And also you should use machine readable formats. So there should be some formats and currently there are three formats: SPDX, software package data exchange, CycloneDX, and software DTX. But yeah, in this talk, I will focus on SPDX and CycloneDX because these are the primarily used formats. As software ID text can be used for all use cases described in this presentation. So before I continue with the use cases, I want to just discuss some myths around SBOM, because when we started with SBOM 3 years ago, we always had some discussions. Should I really create this software bill of material? For example, won't it be a roadmap to attacker? Because when you have your list of used components, and then there's something like, for example, with Heartbleed having a vulnerability in OpenSSL, if I have the software bill of materials and then there's listed you are using OpenSSL in a vulnerable version, isn't this just a attack surface? That's definitely not the case. At the end, it's also providing just transparency for yourself. This makes it possible to identify your assets, which products are using this affected component, and then you can fix them and not just wait till an exploit is available and then attacker uses this attack surface to just exploit this vulnerability. So this helps you to mitigate faster and identify products that are affected by this specific vulnerability. So it just helps yourself. And then a further topic that's just also don't just reduce the attack surface. It's not like these SBOMs are publicly available. Neither the executive order nor the Cyber Resilience Act ask to publish your SBOMs for everybody. It only asks to make it available, for example, for authorities when they are asking for it, or you can also provide it to your customers, but it's not like they are publicly available. So there's currently no obligation to share your SBOMs with everybody or make it on your website and so on. The only thing that's you can do is within your user manual to describe how to get this SBOM, but again, no information about everything on. And further, it's not like it's expose any intellectual property or trade secrets, because at the end, you can just compare it with an ingredients list or recipe, because at the end, you have only the ingredients list. You don't have a recipe with such an SBOM. You are describing the components you are using, but not how you use them. So for example, again, OpenSSL, a huge library with different functionalities, and you are not stating, okay, I'm using this specific functions. I'm just using OpenSSL in this version, but that's it. So you are not exposing any algorithms or code you're using, which also makes it harder. So you still have to do some engineering here to test functionalities. And also maybe there could be the case that you have a supplier that are providing a component to you and you are not allowed to share this information that he is one of your suppliers. There is already a field within SBOMs, whether it be SPDX or CycloneDX, where you can indicate such called known unknowns. So you can state, please be aware, that's not the whole list of components, there are more. And so you are not really there in the problems that you have to share information. You still have these possibilities to indicate just known unknowns. And this leads me to the use cases, to the supply chain. So first of all, it helps you to reduce the risk within your whole supply chain, because if you're aware that you're using some components within your supply chain, you can see that there's which components you're using. Then you have the relationships, the dependencies. And then, I mean, if you have your list of components that you're using and you provide the license information, why not use it for license compliance? So just document every license and then use some tools which make it possible to have your license compliance. And then, as shown before, you can also, for example, provide hashes for your each component and also for your main component. So this makes it possible to have integrity and offensive verification, meaning if I'm providing you a firmware and here's the SBOM of it, you can check is this the same hash. So this also makes possible. And then also we have this topic vulnerability management. However, the SBOM is only a tool for making vulnerability management possible. but you need some further tools like the VEX, the Vulnerability Exploitability Exchange format, where you can document whether you are really affected or not. And so this is just some possibilities. And now to dive a little bit deeper. So for the supply chain risk management, I mean, most of you probably know this picture that maybe there's just one little tool that everything is built on. I mean, we had one prominent example was currently the X-utils, where for a long time there was something built on, then even it made into some Linux distributions, and then, or even Log4j 3 years ago, the topic became more and more prominent because of the Log4j vulnerability or Log4Shell vulnerability. And then everybody started to think, do I using this component or not? And so you had to do a digger deep and understand, am I using this component or not? And for this purpose, just another picture. So if you are the company B, so you have your software bill of materials, and then you want to get your SBOMs from your suppliers from company A. However, which is important, even if you are providing something to company D, so the further product, you are not listing the SBOM from company A. You're just listing you are using product A1, but you are not providing them with the complete information which components are in use, because at the end it won't help anyone. So even if you're supplying it, and then you have just to follow your supply chain. So at the end, if company D gets the SBOM from company B, they can track what's happening with company B, and company B is tracking company A, and so on. So you can just track everything through your supply chain. Then as a next point, the topic license management. This is just also from our experience, which are possible sources to get license information. So the most easiest is within package managers. There are already license information documented. However, we already made the experience that the information provided by package managers, and then if you look at the GitHub repository, there are different license informations. So there's still some inconsistency found there. And then there's also some tools for automatic scanning for licenses, for example, just through the headers in your source code. And then also what's possible is to provide just manual information. I mean, it's just a machine readable format, JSON, where you can just manually type in some information. Maybe if you have some property licenses from a supplier, which can be automatically detected, you can just document it within your software bill of material. And then you can enrich your SBOM within your build process, and then you do some license scanning. Maybe you will have some compliance issues, and only if the license complaints succeed, you can deploy your artifact with your SBOM. And also what's a possible use case is to create such called notice files from this information. The notice file is a list of licenses. So it's just, I mean, within your SBOM, you're using many different components. Then, for example, you have several times the MIT license within your SBOM, and then just within this notice files, you will state once that you're using that you're having the MIT license in use due to this and this component, but you're not listing several times the MIT license. So just reduce the amount of information, and you have everything that you need. So it just helps for this topic FOSS compliance. And this is also from our experience, the beginning for SBOMs, because for vulnerability management, it's still a topic, but for license management, it helps our colleagues. So this was also a main driver to create software bill of materials. Because for vulnerability management, which leads me to this topic, yeah, I mean, if you tell your colleagues you're creating software bill of materials, now you have a list of your used components, and then congratulations, you get 1,000 vulnerabilities you have to analyze. It's not really motivating them. I mean, in German, we have this term Arbeitsbeschaffungsmast, which just measures for creating work. So it was kind of hard for the colleagues to get this idea. But with this license topic, I mean, it's already an issue regarding vulnerability management. It will be important for when the cyber resilience act is in place. So license management was currently the main driver, but it's becoming more and more known that it also can be used for this topic vulnerability management. And there's the way of the VEX files. And in the end, VEX is machine readable, again, a JSON. There are currently different standards which can be used. One of these is the CSAF, the Common Security Advisory Framework, where VEX is a profile. And it just helps you, as it's machine readable, to automate your processes, because up to now, most companies have emails in place. So to inform customers, they are sending out emails, and I mean, it doesn't scale. So if you have to send out for every single vulnerability you have an email to your customers and to each customers and which customers I send information to, it doesn't help. So you have to automate the process. And for this, VEX was defined. And VEX has 4 status you can describe. So first of all, you can state that you are not affected by this vulnerability. If you see this CVE, if you are working on the topic already vulnerability, maybe you identify it as the Log4Shell vulnerability. And there you can state that you are not affected and why are you not affected. There are already defined fields. In this example, just that maybe the vulnerable code is not present. Again, if you're using a huge library, maybe you're just not having this functionality integrated within your component. And then also you have the possibility to state that it's fixed. And then another one is that you are informing your customers that you are affected. And yeah, there you can just state, okay, you are affected, but please update just to a specific version, to the newer version of my product. Then this vulnerability is fixed. And then also what is was important looking at the Cyber Resilience Act, because there will be already in 26, so after 21 months after being in place, you will be obligated to have vulnerability reporting to the most probably ENISA and then your national agency, in this case the BSI in Germany, for example. And there you will have to state that you're having some vulnerability, and then within this VEX file you can just state it's under investigation, and this will be also possibly, I mean, it's still not defined how to do so, but there you could just state, okay, please be aware I have this vulnerability, or I'm aware of this vulnerability because I have it in my software bill of material and it's under investigation, which again just reduces the workload also for the team responsible for vulnerability management, because you don't have to answer to each single customer whether you are affected by this vulnerability or not. You have this automated file which can be read. However, what's important to mention here is that VEX should be seen in parallel to the software bill of materials. It's not necessarily embedded into the SBOM, meaning, for example, the Cyclone X standard makes it possible to have a vulnerabilities field. So you could have within your SBOM also your vulnerability information, but the SBOM is static because, I mean, for this specific version, your list of components shouldn't change. I mean, sure, maybe you have made some mistakes, or maybe you found further components that you want to add. Then for this product version, your SBOM could change. However, this VEX file, this vulnerability information, I mean, there are new vulnerabilities each single day, and the number of vulnerabilities is rising. So to scan every single component and update your VEX file each single time, and then you will inform your customers to update my SBOM, and then it's just the vulnerability information. It just also produces a lot of noise for your customers. That you have this VEX file, and then your SBOM is updated, and then you have to take a look. It doesn't help anyone. So it's better to have, okay, I have here my software bill of material, my list of components, and then I also have my VEX file, the information about vulnerabilities, and then the customer is aware of, okay, list of components, and the other file is the one for vulnerabilities. And then depending on the team responsible for each of these products, they can just decide, okay, do I have to look at the VEX or the software bill of material? So it just also helps to reduce the noise to have 2 different files. So how does such a real life workflow looks like for VEX and SBOM? I just want to state, first of all, why does it help you? So at the end, SBOM and VEX just helps you to automate your process. Currently, the process, at least we see at Festo, is that if you have a report incoming, whether it's be through a scanning process or just reading a newsletter, again, XZOTs being newsletters, and you see that there's maybe some vulnerability, you ask you the questions, is the component in use? So maybe you know, okay, I'm using products having Linux within, then you state, okay, I have to check all products using these components. Then afterwards, it's all manual effort to find every product if you don't have this list of used components. Then you have to analyze whether your product is affected. So just maybe there's proof of concept available. And then maybe you say, okay, I'm affected, or you are not affected. If you're affected, you have to decide how to handle these vulnerabilities. Do you fix it? Maybe you accept the risk. Maybe you say, okay, you are not able to fix this vulnerability because with a newer version, your product doesn't work anymore because maybe a functionality is removed. And then you have to think about a workaround. And afterwards, you do disclosure. Again, up to now, we are aware of many companies that are sending out emails to inform the customer. So it's only just a manual process. And having SBOM and VEX in place helps you to do the automation process, because now with this list of ingredients, list of used software components, you can do automatically scans in different vulnerability databases of your choice. And then you don't have these questions, which products are using these components, because you have a list of, it's the list of components for the specific product and you're scanning for this product. So this question doesn't arise, which products are using the component. So you can just skip the process of identifying products, of using the components. And then for us, it's still a manual effort, because we know there are some solutions driven by AI and so on, which helps you whether your product is affected, but we want to leave the decision to a human user whether the product is really affected, and also to decide how to handle this vulnerability. I mean, you can maybe have some thresholds, like if it's from low severity, I'm not doing anything, but still, it should be the decision from the human user, because at the end, the risk has to be taken by the human user. I can not state later on, yeah, the machine decided for me and that's why I did nothing. So still, we see it's a manual effort, but the disclosure is something that can happen again automatically. So with this VEX file, it's machine readable. You state you are affected or not affected and which actions have to be taken. So it's just apps, and then you have to have some channels to inform your customers. So this is on the abstract level. How does it look like during the development process and also when your product is released? So we try to separate. I mean, at the beginning I mentioned we also are working on this topic, secure development lifecycle, and the SBOM is definitely something that shouldn't be created after your product is finished. It should be created during the development process, and this is something that has to be done by the developer. So the developer creates the software bill of material, and then he scans for vulnerabilities. So he's using a vulnerability scanning tool, and then he gets a VEX file where he can document everything regarding whether he is affected or not. And then, at least if it's a good scanner, you can use this VEX file with your SBOM, and during the next scan, you can apply this VEX file and you will only get new vulnerabilities or which you haven't addressed yet. And then you have just this whole process within this development process where you scan for vulnerabilities, you document everything, and this happens during the whole development process. And when you release your products, you store the finalized SBOM and VEX file within our, for example, repository or whatsoever. So it's something that has to be defined for which company, how they want to work with it. And then the PSIRT is taking the responsibility for using the SBOM to scanning on a daily basis, because again, vulnerabilities are arising each single day. And then they're using the VEX file from the developer. And now we have the advantage, as our colleagues during the development process documented everything already within the development. We only have to ask them for new vulnerabilities. So everything, they have documented everything before. So we don't have, maybe again, that example, I mean, if you're using Linux and you have several different components in use, maybe during the initial scan, you will have over 1,000 vulnerabilities because you're just using old components and it's maybe a full-blown Linux distribution and you get many vulnerabilities. And if you now release your product and you haven't documented everything before, you would just have 1,000 vulnerabilities, and then your colleagues which want to work on further topics now have to document 1,000 vulnerabilities. This won't help them, but if they already documented during the development process, they won't be taken from further products. They only have to document every new vulnerability which arises and state whether they're affected or not. So it just reduces also the noise for colleagues within the development, because they can focus more on products and new products and don't have to start to maintain each single product. And then the scan results can happen within a management tool. Maybe you have a vulnerability management tool in place where you can also have some UI where you can also provide the specs information, then just export it, or you can just work with the specs file. It's just a matter of taste. And then afterwards, you have the specs file, and then you can send it to your customers. Again, it has to be defined how to do so. There are different possibilities. Okay, then, so how to do everything, I just want to show the formats which are currently in place for SBOMs. So yeah, again, 3 formats, but we are focusing on 2, CycloneDX and SBDX. And I know there's much information on the slide, but the key point is that the CycloneDX format started differently than the SBDX, and that's why at the beginning there were some discussions: shall I use CycloneDX or shall I use SBDX? Because SBDX was mainly focused on license management at the beginning, and CycloneDX was more for vulnerability management. But I mean, it's already what you can see that the last row use cases are already for both columns. For the new format, so the version 1.5, and for SBDX 3.0, both SBOM formats are supporting each use case. So you can document your vulnerabilities, you can document your licenses, and also you can just describe not only software libraries, but also maybe, for example, containers and so on. So it's now more a matter of taste, which format do you want to use, but you don't really have any disadvantage when you're using at least the newest version of both formats. This is the main message here. It's up to you to decide which format you want to use. However, what I want to point out is there are still some limitations regarding SBOM in general. So first of all, what I already mentioned during the license topic, we have seen that there are still some inconsistencies between informations, for example, in the package managers and what you find in the GitHub repository. So there's still some possibilities that you get wrong information within your SBOMs. Then also, I mean, you have seen we have 2 different SBOM formats, and then there's no real way. I mean, the authorities are asking for SBOM, but there's no channel for providing SBOMs. So there's still some lack of standardization, whether it's what's the content of an SBOM, or how do we share SBOMs, how do we uniquely identify our software components within an SBOM. So still, there's still some open topics. The topic SBOM arise more and more due to Log4Shell, so 3 years ago, but there are different working groups where you can also participate to help this whole standardization process. And as already mentioned before, SBOMs can produce a lot of noise, whether it's that you are now scanning for vulnerabilities and then you have to ask your developers, which can then not focus on the product development itself because they have to document everything. And also maybe if you're receiving information from your supplier and it's a full-blown SBOM where many information is included, which doesn't add any information or value, it also doesn't help anyone. So it can produce a lot of noise if using wrong. And also what we have seen, but it's highly depending on the sector, is that the companies are lacking processes. So with more conservative companies, it's quite hard to adjust the processes, but due to the executive order, for example, or also in the banking sector in the United States, there are already some regulations in place and they definitely are a little bit further, but again, there should be some processes in place and also processes that make it possible to automatically process everything. And to conclude my presentation, just the reward workflow at Festo. So how do we handle SBOM? So it's just from our experience, which is the initial information within SBOM. So if you are creating your software bill of materials, example from the information from package managers, there are many. If we are using CycloneDX, there are many different open source tools which make it possible to create SBOMs automatically. These are mostly the information you are getting, so not everything that we see as required, but also which will be required by, for example, the NTIA minimum elements. And for this purpose, we also created our own tool, the CycloneDX Data Validator tool, which the abbreviation stands for, CDX-EV. And there we have a comment. Everything happens during the build process in the CI/CD build chain. So there we have our tool, and then you get your license, for example, license information or further information from a database, and there you can enrich your SBOM. And then, for example, you could have documented within this database the supplier, maybe some unique identifiers, then also the license information, because you double checked, is this really the correct information within the SBOM? And then we have this amend command within our tool, where we also try to do, for example, we try to standardize how to name SBOMs. For us, it's the name of the product, the version, and maybe the timestamp, just to also make it possible to uniquely identify your files. And also we add some meta information that the SBOM was automatically created, when was it created, and so on. So just some more information. And then also we are providing the known unknowns. That's just from a legal point of view, we think it's important to state that maybe the SBOM is incomplete or there are some unknown components. And then we have a validate command where you can provide a custom scheme. And this is important for us because the default scheme from CycloneDX, for example, since version 1.4 doesn't require a version field, but we say version is important. So that's why we have this own custom scheme possibility here. And then you can validate your SBOM. Maybe it's already valid within this one step. Maybe you have to go back to the set command. You have to enrich the database. And this makes it possible to collaborate between different business units, because they can just enrich information, and then we have this huge database from which we can take the information, and this is also the collaboration between our developers. And then we hope that at the end everything is valid, and if it's valid, it can be stored in the repository or in a different other way, and there it's possible for the PSIRT to monitor for vulnerabilities. So that's just real quick the workflow we already have in place at Festo. And that would be it from my side. I'm really looking forward for the questions and giving over to Mr. Ebert.
Thanks a lot, Aleg, for this overview on SBOM, and was a lot of very in-depth insights from the practical usage, which I appreciate very much because it gives us good takeaway. And we have questions where I select one which not only received most likes, but it relates also directly to your previous slide. It's from David, and he's asking, can you provide an example of how an SBOM can be integrated into the software development lifecycle? So you show workflow, but I think the question behind would be also to make it more comprehensive, not just the perspective of the SBOM, but also how this relates now, let's say, from perspective of system engineering or analysis, or also maintenance tasks. Can you, without a slide, maybe you just can briefly explain it, what are your experiences to integrate?
I mean, for us, we are from the central department, and we are providing also the CI/CD build chain for our colleagues. And there we just have within this whole build process, we have this creation of SBOMs. So we just take the open source tools, which are already there, and then we use our own tool to just enrich the information within SBOM. So this happens directly at the beginning. So if every time our colleagues are starting the build, there will be also an SBOM created, which we also validated. And then afterwards, if they release the SBOM, we have within our release management process, we check whether it's a valid SBOM. So nothing will be released without a valid SBOM. And then it will be stored within our management tool, and then we can just have this monitoring of us from PSIRT side. So it's happened during the development from the beginning. An initial SBOM was created. It will be updated each single time our colleagues are doing a build, and then it will be deployed.
So you have an automatic, let's say, mechanism in the build process to already check, is the SBOM complete? Would that also include update management?
And for us, it's quite hard, and we have still some discussions open. Do we check SBOMs? Because from our experience,
exactly, yeah.
If you do some binary scanning, for example, yes, it could find some information which you missed, but it can also find wrong information. And
I think this is the challenge also, where, I mean, you come in the beginning quite clearly with the legal demand, which I definitely agree, but the level of abstraction, of course, depends really on what you can do. In other words, it can be sufficient in terms of saying, well, we have now, let's say, a traceability. That's like with the requirement, but do you connect to the right requirement? Do you connect to the right test case? Do you connect to the right software artifact? This is exactly the challenge. And I think there's still a way to go, but this is the basis for all that. But let me get to a question which is very much related. That is now about the PLM, because I mean, you come from industrial automation. You have for sure also since long, let's say, the classic bill of material. So how do you align existing PLM systems towards SBOM support? From our own practice, we often see that the SBOM is a kind of an artificial separate tool, traditionally mostly for license management, as I said earlier, but not much connected to the PLM. In fact, sometimes we even see a complete parallel structure. You have software bill of materials as part of, let's say, software artifact, a repository, a config management, and then you have the traditional mechanical or hardware bill of material. What's your recommendation? What's your insights here?
So from our side, we connected the system. We had to update them. It's a legacy system, and there were information missing which weren't possible to adjust this information. So there was some work to do, but we updated our management system. We didn't create a separate system. What we did create was some automatic checks that no information is provided. So because within this management system tool, maybe some colleagues would say, okay, I would just put in an empty SBOM. At least this file will be there. So we have some checks before in place, but there were definitely some adjustments that need to be made. Just having this file that you are required to have this file. But also, for example, some validations, and also stating, is this SBOM even required? I mean, up to now, maybe if you're looking at the Cyber Resilience Act, you think, okay, it's not feasible to create software bill of materials, and then I don't want to have this product anymore. So you just go to the end of life for your product, and there an SBOM shouldn't be required. So there were definitely some adjustments made and different use cases. But what also helped our colleagues, why it's also maybe helpful to have this within one system, is if you are creating systems, so just many different products you are combining. If you have all the software bill of materials and the different informations for your products within one system, and now you're creating the system, you can collect every single SBOM from your products within this one system. So it also helps you if you're creating systems. This was also from our experience why it's useful to have using the systems that are already existing and not creating new ones.
Another question which receives now quite high amount of votes comes from Raul Cancera, and he asks, how do you achieve a consistent SBOM for continuously updated software and learning systems? So behind that, of course, software is not anymore only changing with updates, but it's adaptive. Sometimes it's adjusting, and for sure, anything related to AI, data-driven, means that it's even more difficult to really tell, well, what is now the baseline?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you have if you're updating your software, the firmware is changing, then you should create a new SBOM. You shouldn't just update the same SBOM. So don't see the biggest issue here. But for example, regarding the topic SBOM, it's still quite new. It's also a feature that was added just in the newest version of Cycling DX, which was just released 1 month ago. And there are also different working groups working this, having this topic now addressed. That how do we create this AI SBOMs? Which information should be within such an AI bomb? But it's still open.
Because I can imagine, I mean, as long as you have some sort of tangible software with variant and versioning, that's an SBOM which can be in depth, but it's available as soon as you have, even for software update management, which would also be driven by code fragments which are inserted, they can again be versioned. But when you come to rules, would that then go down to in terms of granularity? That is also another question which we have here. Would that granularity go down to single, let's say, specified features, if you want, or in an AI system, or what would be the level of granularity which is currently discussed or recommended?
It's again also open because you shouldn't, means then we would have again the discussion regarding intellectual property. So how much information do we really want to provide? And it's still software bill of material. There's AI bomb, there is cryptographic bomb, there could be a hardware bomb. So just your hardware lessons on, there are different bill of materials. And for AI bombs, for example, at least the most use case I currently have seen is just providing the hyperparameters. So which were the hyperparameters used for your models that you don't provide, for example, also the data used within this bill of material.
Mm-hmm. And I think we have room for one last question, again from David Bajaj. But it's a good one, which is about how shall organization handle the complexity of transforming from having almost no SBOM into moving forward in the direction you explained. Background here, I can guess it was just what is the introduction strategy which you recommend? What granularity? What is type of starting point?
Yeah, so just don't wait at the end. So the experience we made is that it was quite hard because, I mean, from the industry we are coming with more embedded systems, so C, C++, and at least some years ago there were no package managers available. Now there's Conan, or also for embedded system Rust and so on. So there are now some package managers for embedded systems, but 20 years ago there were none, and that was some huge effort for our colleagues to create SBOMs there. And that's why we said, okay, our starting point is to choose always just one product for each ecosystem you have. So for example, for our whole product profiler, okay, we choose one C, C++ system, then one Java, and so on. So just some different types of ecosystems, and we create one SBOM. And then we see, okay, which are the issues? For example, what's the information we get from this initial package managers? Which information do we have to enrich? And then, I mean, if you create one SBOM for a Java project, then creating for many different Java projects is just scaling up. So that was our experience. Choose one product for each ecosystem you have, and then scale up.
Yeah, and I mean, there's certainly much more to discuss, so we have to look also to our time. And I appreciate very much, Aleg, for your real hands-on insight from your SBOM experiences from Festo. Thank you. And I would come back to close with some final remarks. First of all, the survey, it's about 30-70 split between we have control, we have not sufficient control. So I think we learned today a lot, which goes way beyond traditional configuration control, and very glad to have had this overview. And that means we need now also to move forward, see where do we go from here. And we have next week presentation from Tunji University on autonomous driving technologies for robots and vehicles. So full different topic. The common denominator would be it's again an emerging technology. It's AI driven. It would be about autonomous driving and what would be technologies used not only in normal quote mobility, but also for robots. And what we then also see in the future is 3 more. So we have in a total of 7 such presentations. We look already forward also into 25, which is our next year. We talk here about a growing topic, which is that we see the boundaries disappearing between embedded and enterprise software, or you can also say between product IT and enterprise IT. A good example is what we just heard. You have, for instance, automation system, you have robots, you might have any other sort of a system which have an increasing amount of software on board, but also continuously updating, exchanging with the cloud. And therefore, there's a fluid evolution of software, maybe services which are just used on a needed basis. And all that would be the topic which we cover next year. Continuous IT for critical system is what we call it. It's a topic where certainly many of you are already active, and the way we will handle that is again on a weekly basis, similar to this year. You can already register. That brings the advantage that you get more information as soon as we have the setup. And if you're interested to present also experiences one day, just contact us, and we'll see how this fits into our series of events. Again, let me remind you also to our quiz. I put the link here on the upper right, so you can also participate here. And then I hope that you will be successful in keeping the consistency of your software systems. I thank very much to Aleg Vilinski of Festo to give us today this overview on the software bill of material demystifying. That is a good and catchy title, because you showed very nicely that this is not just about building a lot of overhead. Sometimes it's just simple necessity in order to mitigate your legal risk, in order to keep consistency. And therefore, big thank you, Aleg, and thanks to all of you who joined with very good questions. And beyond that, contact us if you have questions on SBOM, because we also consult on this topic. We currently build pilots for different situations on SBOM introduction. And at the same time, also wish you, for those who listen to the recorded presentation, all the best. And we are, of course, reachable. Thank you, and stay alert. There will be more to come here. Thank you.
Thank you.